I want to read to you portions of Exodus chapter 30, and I want to link that reading to the Gospel on 12. As we look at how Jesus, in every detail, became the offering, the sin offering that God desired, Father desired in heaven, and how in the Old Testament, in the days of Moses, when he gave instruction onto how to set up the Holy of Holies, where to place everything, how they were to perform their duties, all of it was a prefiguring of what Jesus did in the day that he was sentenced to death by Pontius Pilate. You'll notice that there is a sense of awe, there's a sense of intimacy, there's a sense of vicious cruelty, a sense that how can something so innocent, so pure, so lovely be treated so horribly? When you look at the Old Testament Passover service and how the priests were to conduct that service. And the overwhelming theme of it all is that this is a very holy thing. And when we get to the atonement, what Jesus died to perform, and we start to put more and more attention and more of our concentration on such an awesome thing as what the Lord did on Mount Moriah or Golgotha, when he was put outside of the camp, when he was put and crucified, treated as dung, and treated as a wretched criminal. And Barabbas, who was a truly, in every way, a wretched criminal, he was released from his sentence of death. And that same sentence the Jews required of Jesus, who was the blameless one, the perfect one, the innocent one. Just like the lamb, when the Lord said, select for yourself the best of the flock, the one who has no blemish, and it's young and it's tender, and it is inspected thoroughly, and then it is presented to be slaughtered. And then the blood of that lamb, that pure, unblemished, very innocent lamb, is then sprinkled all over the altar, and then at some point onto the people, on the priest, on his ear, on his right thumb, on his right big toe. And all these things signify the purification and the cleansing and the washing, so that the high priest could enter the Holy of Holies, so they could even go in. And if he didn't do anything just right, he would be killed by God because he cut a corner, because he overlooked something. God doesn't mess around. If you remember, when they were moving the Ark of the Covenant from where it was, I think it was in Hebron, and then David decided, because he had just won and gotten the city of Jerusalem after defeating the Jebusites, and that is where he desired to build the Lord a house, that he wanted to move the Ark of the Testimony, which was to be moved only by the Levites and in a very prescribed method. It was to be carried by the Levites. It was not to be carried about in a wagon and pulled by an oxen. And because he didn't take careful attention to how he transported the Ark of the Covenant, and it tipped, and Uzzah reached out his hand to try to keep it from falling, that the Lord struck Uzzah dead. And it made David very angry that he left the ark, and Obed-Edom was lavishly and bountifully blessed because he housed the ark for 3 months in the threshing floor. And David then goes back to get the Ark of the Testimony, and he pays the right price. The guy just wants to give it to him. He said, "You're king, man. I'm just going to..." No, he said, "I cannot take what rightfully belongs to the Lord, that I am the caretaker and the steward of, and not pay a proper amount or a proper sum for what you did to preserve and keep and tend." And because he had noticed how blessed Obed-Edom was in everything, because he kept the Ark of the Testimony. And what we have to see come back to the church is this holiness, is this purity, not a rigid, legalistic holiness, but a devotional holiness, a loving, embracing passionate holiness for Christ. And if we don't get that back, we will not bring the church back. We will just be another movement. We'll be just another thing. And people will talk well of us for a while, and then we'll fade, and we'll become like everything else that's been set up in the last 50 years. So we need to be very careful in these days when we talk about rebuilding the Church of Jesus Christ. We have to be very careful in how we build. He says, you shall make an altar as a place for burning incense. There's going to be a very significant connection between incense burning, candle, and light burning, and this having to be a constant burning, a constant lighting. And there's something that's represented there in that burning, and we'll discuss that later. He says, you shall make it of acacia wood. Its length shall be a cubit, which is 18 inches. Its width a cubit, and it shall be square. And its height shall be 2 cubits. Its horn shall be of one piece with it, and you shall overlay it with pure gold. The best gold must overlay this wood. Its top and its sides all around, its horns, you shall make a gold molding all around for it. And you shall make 2 gold rings for it under its moldings, and you shall make them on its 2 side walls on opposite sides, and they shall be holders for poles with which to carry it. And you shall make the poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold. And you shall put this altar in front of the veil that is near the ark of the testimony, in front of the mercy seat that is over the ark of the testimony, where I will meet with you. Notice the connection of the ark of the testimony that has the law of God, has Aaron's rod that budded, and the manna, that supernatural food from heaven. Inside of that ark is the provision of God, the truth of God, the food of God. It is holy, and it sits by the mercy seat. Without mercy, without God having mercy constantly operating around anything going on down here with human activity and human worship, there must be the constant awareness of the need of mercy. And so forever and ever, at the throne in heaven and here in the tabernacle on earth, there is a constant reference to the mercy of God. And that's vitally and purely connected to the truth, the food of God. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word, every prescribed method and practice of God. Man shall not live by his own instincts. Man shall not design for himself his own worship. Man shall not concoct for himself gods of his own imagination. The God that we serve has told us who he is and what he's like. And he says, now this is the way that I want you to worship me, in holiness. And there was a veil that separated all the activities of men, and only one man who had the right genealogy, who did the prescribed purification process, who made himself right before the Lord, who was selected by God and selected by men, and he was the only one that could go into the Holy of Holies. And if he deviated in any way from anything that God said, he would be murdered by God. That's how serious God is about how we approach him. And when Aaron trims the lamps at twilight, he shall burn the incense. There shall be a perpetual incense before the Lord throughout your generations, and you shall not offer any strange incense on this altar, just as I have said. You shall not just concoct for yourself a formula, an incense that you think is better. You shall not do that, says the Lord. We shall not put together formulas on how we will worship Jesus Christ. We will worship him in truth and in the fullness of the Spirit. But we will not just come together any old way, flippantly and carelessly. We will come because our God is still a consuming fire, as it says in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 30. We must not approach the mercy seat in any less sobriety than the high priest. But we come knowing the grace of God in the face of Jesus Christ, that glorious face of a slain and brutally beaten lamb that is now the king, the lion of the tribe of Judah.